She was there before we even left the driveway. We just didn't know it yet. This is the story of the most important trip of my life and how someone almost made sure it was also the last. My name is Daniel, and about 3 years ago, I planned the most important road trip of my life. I'm not the type of person who does things small. When I decide something matters, I go all in. So when I knew I wanted to propose to my girlfriend, Maya, I didn't just get down on one knee at a restaurant. I mapped out a 2-week road trip across the country. Mountains, open skies, national parks, sleeping under the stars every night. Just the two of us. No hotels, no crowds, a truck with a camper bed, an air mattress, and the kind of quiet you only find when you're far enough from civilization that the world stops making noise. Maya was the kind of woman who made every place feel like somewhere worth being. She laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. She cried at commercials. She also had a deeply irrational fear of bears, which she would fully admit was irrational, and then continue to be afraid of bears anyway. I loved her completely. I wanted to marry her in the middle of nowhere, under a sky full of stars, and for the first half of the trip, everything was exactly that perfect. What happened next is something I've only told a handful of people, not because I don't want to talk about it, but because every time I do, I remember one specific detail, and it changes the entire story. I'll get to that detail. But first, I need to tell you what we thought was happening. It started on night 4. We'd set up in a remote campsite, the kind of place where you don't see another vehicle for miles. The air was cold and clean. Maya had finally stopped scanning the tree line for bears long enough to fall asleep. I wasn't far behind her. Somewhere around 2 a.m., she shook me awake. She didn't say anything at first. She just grabbed my arm and held it tight, the way she did when something scared her, but she didn't want to admit it out loud. I listened. Nothing. Wind through the pines, a distant owl. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching over the dirt and dry grass just outside the truck bed. I told her it was probably an animal. A deer, maybe. She nodded, but she didn't loosen her grip on my arm. We lay there in the dark, not moving, not speaking, until the sound faded and the night went quiet again. By morning, she was exhausted. I asked if it was the bears keeping her up. She paused before answering. That pause told me everything. I heard someone walking outside the truck, she said. Not an animal, a person. I believed she believed that. I told her I did. But in my head, I was already explaining it away. We were in the middle of nowhere. No one was out there. It was the wind or the trees or the half-sleep playing tricks. Then I found the planner. It was sitting open on the back seat. My travel planner, the one I kept in my bag, was lying on the seat, open to the page where I had written every stop on our route, every campsite, every location, every night, mapped out in my handwriting. I stood there staring at it. I couldn't remember leaving it there. I thought maybe Maya had been looking at it. When I asked her, she shook her head. She hadn't touched it. I told myself I must have left it there myself and forgotten. I put it back in my bag. We got coffee from the thermos, got back on the road, and I didn't bring it up again. I should have brought it up again. What happened next changed the entire shape of the trip. 3 days later, I got down on one knee at the edge of a cliff overlooking a valley so wide and green it didn't look real. Maya said yes before I finished the sentence. We spent that day in a daze, laughing, calling family, taking pictures with shaking hands. That night, for the first time in days, she fell asleep quickly. I watched her breathe, the ring catching the moonlight, and I felt like nothing in the world could touch us. I almost didn't hear it. It started soft, a slow, careful sound just beyond the edge of the truck, like something, or someone, trying not to make noise and failing just slightly. This time I didn't explain it away. I moved slowly to the side of the truck bed and looked over the edge. A figure, small, hooded, walking around the front of the truck, head down, mumbling something too quiet to make out. I dropped back into the truck bed before they saw me. My heart was slamming. I told myself to think. The figure was small, probably a woman. She didn't seem to know I'd seen her. She was still walking, still mumbling, circling the truck like she was doing something she'd done before, like this wasn't the first time. I grabbed my phone and typed a note for Maya. "Don't make a sound. Someone is outside. Take the keys. Start the truck when I jump out. I'll get in." I woke her gently, pressed my finger to my lips before she could speak, held up the phone. Her eyes went wide, but she didn't scream. She nodded. I handed her the keys, took a breath, and jumped out. Nobody was there. I stood in the dirt, knife in hand, scanning the darkness around the truck. Nothing. No figure. No footsteps retreating into the woods. Just the night, perfectly still, like the person had simply disappeared. I lowered my guard, took one step toward the tree line, and the pain hit me like a thunderclap. Something smashed into my ankle with enormous force, and I went down hard, hands catching the gravel. Before I could get up, I heard her, crawling out from under the truck, screaming, throwing a thick tree branch that hit my arm as I raised it in defense. Then the glint of a knife. She swung it wildly, erratically, her movements twitching and unpredictable. I backed away, keeping distance, my ankle screaming with every step. She was small, but she was fast, and there was nothing behind her eyes except something broken and burning. When I felt I had enough space between her and the truck, I shouted for Maya to go. The engine turned. The headlights flooded the campsite. The woman spun toward the truck and ran for it. I screamed for Maya not to stop, and she didn't. She reversed, swung wide, and drove a few feet before turning the wheel and accelerating straight back toward the woman. The woman dove sideways into the dirt. Her hood fell back, and I saw her face. The world stopped. I knew that face. I had known that face for 3 years. 3 years of late nights and unanswered messages and police reports and a restraining order that had eventually expired. 3 years of telling myself it was over. It was Kara, my ex-girlfriend. We had dated briefly in our early 20s. What started as something real had slowly revealed itself to be something else entirely. Obsessive, suffocating, impossible to end cleanly. When I finally ended it, she didn't accept it. She would appear outside my apartment at 2 a.m., just standing on the sidewalk, staring up at the window. When confronted, she would say she still loved me. That was all. Just love, she said. Just love. The last I had heard, years ago, she had gotten help, was doing better, had moved on. She was lying in the dirt 40 miles from the nearest town, crying, a kitchen knife in the gravel beside her. She hadn't moved on. I got in the truck. We drove. I didn't look back. When the signal came back, I called the police and gave them everything. Her name, her description, the location. My hands were shaking so badly that Maya had to hold the phone for me. What came next was almost harder to process than the night itself. The police found Kara. She had walked out of the wilderness on her own and gone home. When they showed up at her door, she didn't run. She didn't lie. She sat them down, offered them coffee, and told them everything. She had known about the trip before we left. She had been following us for 2,000 miles. She had watched us sleep on more nights than just the ones we knew about. The planner on the back seat. She had gone through it, memorized our route, and put it back. She had wanted to know exactly where we would be, every night. When they asked why she hadn't done anything sooner, she said she couldn't bring herself to. When they asked what changed on the last night, she said, the ring. She'd seen it catch the moonlight. She was taken in for psychiatric evaluation. She told them she wanted to be admitted. She said she knew she wasn't well and that she was tired of not being well. When they asked if she'd wanted to hurt me, she didn't answer. When they asked if she'd wanted to hurt Maya, she said yes, without hesitation. It's been a few years now. Maya and I are married. We have a house and a dog and a life that feels, most days, completely normal. She checks Kara's social media sometimes. I used to ask her to stop. Now I understand why she does it. It's the only way to know. The last update I received from the detective on the case was that Kara had been released from the facility after completing her program. That was 14 months ago. Her social media accounts have been quiet ever since. No posts, no activity, nothing. And every now and then, late at night, when the house is quiet and the only sound is the wind moving through the trees outside, Maya reaches over and holds my arm, the same way she did that first night in the truck, and neither of us says a word. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Stay safe out there. You never really know who's watching, or for how long.